Welcome to Candid Conversation. Today we're going to talk about 1 Timothy 6 verse 20. It talks about oppositions of science falsely so called. And so we're going to talk about man making himself out to be God with science, because that's what it's all about. In Romans chapter 1, when man has the knowledge of God within him, he knows of his eternal power and Godhead. Man knows he is worthy of the judgment of God, which is death due to his sin. Romans 1 talks about that downward spiral of sin where man does not like to retain the knowledge of God within himself. And so he ends up worshiping the creature more than the creator. And that's where this science comes in, the oppositions of science falsely so called. Science means knowledge, and there's nothing wrong with science and the study of knowledge. What's wrong is, as Paul tells Timothy, the oppositions of science falsely so called, that science is falsely called science or knowledge when really it is man's foolishness. It is that man takes his knowledge of God, wants to get rid of it, and so then he replaces it with his own knowledge. Romans calls it foolish imaginations. The man did not like to retain the knowledge of God within him, and so he became vain in his imaginations, and his foolish heart was darkened. Professing himself to be wise, he became as fools. He transformed the knowledge of God, the incorruptible God, into an image made like unto man, and corruptible beast, four-footed beast. So this is the issue. And so a lot of times we'll talk about, when we talk about oppositions to science falsely so called, I'll mention things like, the Big Bang Theory, evolution. That man knows there is a God, and he knows he's worthy of death as a result of his sin. Therefore, he tries to get rid of that knowledge of God by replacing it with evolution. The idea that we all came from apes or monkeys and we all evolved, so then there was no creator, there was no God, and so then we could be our own God. And that's true, but what we've got today, and I've been talking lately this week about technology, and so I wanted to focus on that today. Basically, a good definition of science is, or what man uses as science is, man thinks he is God. And before, it was done with a wild, crazy theory about where we came from. But now what's dangerous is that man doesn't rely upon God anymore because he's using technology to become his own God. A lot of times religion is seen as, if you go to church, you trust in Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection as atonement for your sin, you read your Bible. A lot of times that's seen as a crutch for people who just can't cope with the world. It's like that's your coping mechanism. But because I've graduated from college and I got a good job, I don't need God. Everything's fine with me. But if you're struggling with alcoholism, or your wife left you, or some tragedy happened in your family, or you're just got mountains of debt, or you got all these problems in this world, well, then you turn to God. But the problem is that that's not how it is. In reality, all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. All are worthy of death as a result of our sin. And so it's not that we should be turning to God only if things aren't good in this world. The problem is that man looks at this world as what is eternal, when really the things of this world are temporal or temporary. So man will only turn to God when things in this world go bad. But the problem is that we are going to spend eternity either in hell or in heaven. And if we've never trusted in Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection as atonement for our sin, then we are headed for hell. So it doesn't matter if you are rich in this world, got a good job, got a loving family, have great health, and no problems in this world, or if you've got nothing but problems. All of us have the sin problem that is only dealt with Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection as atonement for our sin. And so we should be looking not at the things which are temporal or temporary, which are the things of this earth, but the things that are eternal, which are the things of heaven. But because most people just look at it, they walk by sight and not by faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. But they're not concerned about that. They're just concerned about this material world. And the problem with having that material world perspective is that if things are going okay in this material world, people think, well, I don't need that. I don't need Jesus. I don't need to go to church. That's okay for you because you use religion as a crutch and you got problems, but I don't have problems. Everything is fine. Of course, if they looked at the spiritual, they'd see everybody has the sin problem and everybody is bound for hell for their sin. But they don't look at that. They only look at the material world. So the problem with technology and science today that helps man's cause in this earth is that by having fewer problems in this world due to technology, then man is less likely to turn to God. I think of the slaves back 150, 200 years ago in this country. A lot of them went to church. They believed the gospel. A lot of those people, a lot of those slaves are in heaven right now. And the reason is because they were oppressed in this world. They didn't have anything in this world. Even if their masters treated them well, they still didn't own anything, or it was hard for them to have a family. And so they couldn't put any hope in this world. They'd be out working on the crops all day. They'd be singing what are called Negro spirituals because they made up songs about how wonderful it's going to be when they get to heaven. They set their affection on things above because that's all they had, the things of this world. You get depressed if you looked at those things. And so more of them, I think, more of the slaves went to heaven than the masters because the slaves were trusting in God, whereas the masters are trusting in the things of this world. So if you look at today and you look at the technology, you notice fewer and fewer people go to church nowadays because they think they don't need it. Everything is fine. I don't need a wife. I've got appliances that will microwave my food, and I can buy store-bought food, and I can make things quicker with a blender or with a stove, or I can take a shower real easily. I can clean my own clothes. All this stuff that a wife normally would do in a house been replaced by machines. So all of a sudden, we don't have the nuclear family anymore because we don't need a wife anymore. We just have our own selves, and, well, you need it for companionship. So then it ends up being sex ends up being a recreational thing rather than something that is necessary to propagate the species, to keep life going. I don't need children to take care of me later on because I've got Social Security, or I got a retirement plan. Or I could hire somebody to help me out. I've got technology that will take care of things. So all of a sudden, we've eliminated wife and kids. We don't need those anymore. And now what they're doing is they're eliminating God and other things, these natural things. Now, for example, rain. You need rain to get food. Well, a lot of places now, you only need rain in the agricultural areas. You don't need it in the city anymore because we get the food from other places. People aren't growing their own food or shooting their own meat, shooting their own beast, a bird and cow or deer or whatever it is to have food. They don't need that anymore. They get it from the store. It's all store-bought. And so then the rain isn't needed. But of course the rain is needed for agriculture and things. And, we'll just, no problem there. We'll just create our own rain. They've got cloud seeding now, where you can seed clouds and somehow get rain from that. Dubai, over there in the Middle East, you got the wealthiest people in the world. You got a couple people actually trillionaires. I can't even imagine that kind of wealth, that kind of money. You look at what Dubai looks like today. It's just crazy how much wealth is in there because of all the oil. And so they've been talking about, I don't know if they'll ever do it, but they've been talking because, in the Middle East out there, it's a lot of sand. They don't have the rain. They got the wealth from the oil, but they don't have the rain for crops and everything. So, we do know that what creates rain are mountains, because mountains are higher up elevation, and the higher up the elevation is, the more rain you get, because for every 1,000 feet you go up in elevation, the temperature cools by about 4 degrees. So if you have a 10,000 foot mountain, well, that's a 40-degree cooler at the top than it is at the bottom. And the cooler the air there, the more likely you're able to get the rain and the snow and everything. Of course, snow, you really get a lot of moisture from that. And so you look at areas like Southern California, for example. When I lived there, there's a mountain range that runs north to south, sort of in the middle of the state, middle as far as where you're going from east to west. In the middle of the state, there's this huge mountain range. It runs north to south. And so on the mountains, you've got a lot of big trees, a lot of rain there. But then on the eastern side of the mountain, it's desert. You don't have rain there, because the mountain takes up all the moisture in the clouds. As the clouds have to go up higher in elevation, then the moisture from the clouds gets dumped onto the mountain, because the temperature is cooler down there. So that the rain gets dumped over there. Whereas on the other side now, all the rain has been dumped out of the clouds and to the mountain, and so now the other side is desert. So in Dubai, what they're talking about doing, and it is said it would cost them $200 million to do it at least, is to make an artificial mountain. So they need rain. Hey, no problem. We'll just make our own mountain and we'll get our rain. Yeah, and to me, that's a big, the cloud seeding is one thing. I mean, you're using technology to get rain, but the big thing that I see that really shows that you think you're God is when you can make it rain. How does that work, There are a lot of things that God does that we can duplicate. Sun. The sun gives you light. You couldn't work at night before because you didn't have any light to see, but that's okay. We create artificial light. So now we don't need the sun anymore. We got light ourselves. Up in Russia, I don't know, I guess they still do it, but I know vitamin D is something that you get from the sun. And up in northern parts of Russia, there are some places they don't get much sun. So they have the kids sit out in front of heat lamps to get their vitamin D. So you create artificial sun with heat lamps, or like at the gym, they got these tanning booths. You can go in there and get you a tan. So you create artificial light to get tans or to get heat, to get vitamin D. You create artificial lights so that you can run a city round the clock. Las Vegas, I went there for a conference one time. You don't see any clocks in these hotels, these casinos there, because it's called the city that never sleeps. We went to see the national parks last year in Utah. Wonderful trip. Southern Utah, 5 national parks we covered in 6 days. And it was cheaper to fly into Vegas and rent a car and then drive up there. It's not too far from Utah. And we got in 1 in the morning, I think, is when my plane landed. And then went and got a rental car. 2 in the morning, I'm getting a rental car. 3 in the morning, I'm going to bed in a hotel. I'm doing all these things at night. You're able to fly cross country in the middle of the night. You're able to get a rental car at 2 in the morning. I could have gotten anything I wanted, breakfast or, whatever at that time. And it's just, man becomes his own God. But before, God says, well, you got to sleep at night. So I'll turn the lights out and you go to sleep. You can't do anything. Man says, oh no, I'll keep working. And man gets greedy, more and more greedy about the material world. And so then man keeps working at night with his artificial lights. And then man can't get food and crops because he's in a desert. And man says, hey, no problem. We'll just build our own mountain. Or we'll seed the clouds. There was some project up in Alaska, even the government and Congress has talked about it, where they could, and I don't know what they were doing. It wasn't cloud seeding, but they had some big machines on the ground, and they're able to control the weather. You look at today, and they talk about global warming. Climate change, global warming. We gotta reduce the temperatures, and here we're having our lows in about 20 degrees or in the high teens, which is close to record lows. I don't know about that global warming. Oh, it's not global warming, it's climate change. Really? You know, we've always had climate change. It's called winter is when it gets cold, and it's called summer when it gets hot. I mean, that's not, yeah, climate change. God is the one who did that. It's called seasons. But now it seems like they're saying, well, it's a higher temperature. Well, maybe it's a higher temperature because there are more people. I know if more people you get in an area, the more the temperature goes up. Maybe it's all this technology creating heat. I tell you, they got so many computers and internet stuff and all this technology going on that's on all night that warms up places. I know when I worked at ADP, they had a big computer room. And boy, they had that air on full blast. They had to keep it cold for those machines, but they had to really have that air on because it's so warm in there normally because of all the energy that the machines generate. And on top of all of that, you've got more and more people going to hell, and hell is in the middle of the earth. So, you know, I think about, like, let's say I'm cooking a pizza in the oven. Well, I go over there, check on the pizza. The stove is hot. The stovetop is hot. I didn't turn the burner on, but because I've got the oven below it on, it heats up the top of the stove because it's hot beneath, so it gets hot above. So if you got more and more people in hell, the book of Isaiah said, hell hath enlarged herself. So if more and more people are in hell, then it means it's hotter down below. The oven is turned up higher. It's hotter down below, so now it's going to be hotter above on the earth. So we got all this climate change. Well, you know, are they, so you've got natural causes. So if, and I don't know if it is, like I say, it's going to be 20 degrees here. I don't know if man can do things to override God in terms of the seasons like this, but because it's still going to be really cold the next couple nights here. And then it's going to be really warm in the summer because of seasons. But even if it is, say, a couple degrees warmer in the summer, or you know, or in the winter, maybe those are the reasons, because people are in hell, or that there are more people on the earth, or you got technology generating energy. Maybe those are the reasons. But you see, man trying to regulate these things. You know, we can do things because we got air conditioning. You know, it used to be you'd sweat it out in the summer. You wouldn't have that many people living here. Everybody back in the 1950s, a lot of people moved from the south over to California. Why? So they can get out of this miserable heat and then the snow and the cold in the winter, go to a milder climate. But now you don't need to do that because you turn the air conditioner on or you turn the heater on. You don't have the suffering. My point is you don't have the sufferings. Back in the Old Testament, God says, okay, Israel, you don't want to obey me? I'll stop the rain. I'll cause a famine. And what does man do today? He says, hey, we don't need that. We don't need God to make it rain. We'll seed the clouds. We'll build our own mountains. We'll create this stuff ourselves. Or we got all this water in the ocean. We'll just have a desalinization plant, take the salt out of the water, and we'll use that water. You know, man, it's like we've got all these modern conveniences. You don't get hot because you got an air conditioner. You don't get cold because you got a heater. You can work at night because you got electric lights. All the sufferings, you got sufferings in the body. Well, we'll go to a doctor. They'll give you a pill to help it out, whatever it is. Here's your pill that will take care of your problem that you have. Or, you know, we'll do this treatment to take care of whatever it is. Now, I know there's still some diseases and things that are terminal, but for the most part, people are living a lot longer now. Why? Because they go to a doctor, and the doctor gives them whatever pill or whatever treatment they need, and all of a sudden you can keep living. And then we don't need God to give us a good crop of peaches or a good crop of whatever it is, because we make our own artificial food. And so you got all this stuff set up to eliminate man's suffering. And when you eliminate man's suffering, man will walk by sight and not by faith. And since he only sees God as something that I need as a crutch if I can't find any other alternative, it's like God and recognizing my sin and going to church is the method of last resort for man and his flesh, because his flesh is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. And so now that we've got all this technology and things, then what we've done is we've eliminated the need for God. And so when Paul told Timothy to beware of oppositions of science falsely so called, that's what he's talking about, things like this. I don't need to go to church. It used to be you'd go to church all day on a Sunday. What else are you going to do? It's your day off. Well, I don't need to do that. I can watch TV, or I can listen to music, or I could do, there are all these different types of entertainment now through technology that I can have that wasn't available 100, 150 years ago. And so now we don't go to church on Sunday. We do what our flesh wants to do. Before it's like, I don't have anything else to do. Might as well spend all day at church. I don't need that now. And then you have to go and have a potluck because all the places are closed on Sunday. I can go down to the fast food place and get a burger on a Sunday. They're open all the time now. So we've got all these modern conveniences and technology to where it seems like we've eliminated our need for God. We don't need to pray for God to heal us. We go to the doctor instead and do whatever the doctor tells us to do. We don't need rain from God. We create a mountain, or we have cloud seeding. We don't need God because we don't have anything to do, because we got plenty to do. We can pull up anything we want on our phone. And so all of this, what it does is it gets all the technology gets man to focus on the world, and all this knowledge is false knowledge. They became fools, became vain in their imaginations. And they were fools because now they're following their own knowledge, oppositions of science falsely so called, rather than the knowledge of God. And that's the danger of the situation that we're in. But of course, the good news is the Word of God can overcome that. And you can still see your sin problem, and you can still have Christ live in you. And you can use modern technology to help you with that. Watching these videos or listening to the Bible through Alexander Scorby, reading it digitally speaking. There's a lot of good things from that as well. But we got to keep our flesh down and die daily to our flesh so that we don't use technology for distractions, but we set our affection on things above and let Christ live in us instead. Thanks for watching.